Nice. So, hi everyone to our What's New in SAP HANA Cloud session for Q2 2024. It's great to see all of you in this webinar, and we're excited to share the most recent innovations that have been added to SAP HANA Cloud. As always, it's not only me in this call. I do have a backend filled with our product experts who will be presenting the innovations in their respective area of expertise and will also be available for answering your open questions. So definitely feel free to use our Q&A tool to post in your open questions on the recent SAP HANA Cloud innovations. With this, we're taking a look at today's agenda. As always, we're starting with a short general update with some specific innovations and definitely some highlights of the recent release. Then we will move over to SQL plan management. We will hear a bit more about what's going on in the administration and tooling space. Then we will listen to the most recent additions in machine learning in SAP HANA Cloud. We will get an update on the migration, and we will also get an update for database modeling via calculation views. So a lot of exciting topics. As always, feel free to drop in your questions into our Q&A tool, and our experts will be happy to answer them. So without wasting too much time, as we do have a pretty much filled agenda, we're jumping into our general update for today. And we're starting off strong with the Cloud Connector that is now also supporting the data lake component. The Cloud Connector is an on-premise client, and it will help users of SAP HANA Cloud to create a link between SAP BTP apps and on-premise systems. So you can now support outbound connections from SAP HANA Cloud to your existing on-premise assets. This will definitely help you to import data into your SAP HANA Cloud Data Lake relational engine, and you can now also execute federated queries against the on-premise data sources. So definitely a big benefit, especially in hybrid landscapes. Next on my list is the innovation to create Fabric virtual tables in SAP HANA Deployment Infrastructure. Probably you've also known this by SAP HDI. What we're adding with the recent release is we're extending the virtual tables to be, first of all, static cache, so snapshots, and also replicas. Both will be fully transparent to the application. This provides you 3 specific benefits. So the HDI usage is a bit more complete. It also simplifies the usage for Fabric virtual tables without using schemas. So really nice here. And it also enables performance optimizations, which you can see with the statements at the bottom of the slide that will help you to optimize your performance. So moving on to definitely one of my highlights of this release, we're improving the scalability of SAP HANA Cloud. So with the Q2 2024 release, we're adding the capability to scale up to 12 terabytes. So you can have instances that are bigger, that are 12 terabytes big. And looking a bit into the future, we will even increase the size up to 24 terabytes, but only in Q4 this year. So what is this giving to you? You can now better support mission critical workloads when you're migrating large on-premise systems into the cloud. So if you want to scale up and down dynamically, we're now offering a bit more flexibility, and you can also provision and deploy on hyperscalers and data centers of your specific choice. So last for the general update from my side is an innovation in the multimodal area. So with our recent release, we're introducing a new spatial function that will help you to compare and analyze the spatial relationships between 2 sets of geographic features. It could be lines, polygons, or points. What is this giving to you? in real world, shapes are often and data is often imperfect. So with the recently added ST-Hausdorff distance function, the analysis and comparison of entire shapes, even if they are not a perfect circle, for example, will become easier, and you will be able to flexibly handle and compare different geometries. With this, we already managed to get through the general update, and I'm really happy to hand it over to my colleague Tesuk, who will give us a bit more insights into the innovations in SQL performance. Over to you, Tesuk.
Thank you, Susan. So I'm the product manager for SQL and SQL Script. And today I would like to introduce the improvements around the SQL plan management. We tried to make HANA Cloud more self-tuning to make sure that the performance of the SQL executions are executing optimally. And we are beginning to start making improvements in the SQL plan management area. And first of all, I would like to explain why there are fluctuations or degradations of the SQL execution. So there are various reasons why a SQL execution can fluctuate. First reason is related to the parameterized queries. So depending on the different parameter values, each parameter value sets can have different data distribution. But when you're executing the SQL statement for such parameterized queries, the first plan that is compiled and generated will be cached, and this plan will be used for all subsequent parameterized queries. That's why you would be seeing fluctuations in the execution times based on these parameterized queries. Another type of degradations you may see is the characteristics differences between our internal execution engines. So currently we're trying to improve the execution engine with our latest and most innovative technology based on Hex, but still not all queries are fully ported to the Hex execution at this point. So there are some queries that will still be executing in the non-Hex environment, but gradually moved over to Hex. So in such a case, with the latest innovations in each of the QRC release, some existing queries that have been running in the older engines would be gradually moved over to Hex. But in certain situations, it may be that the older execution engines were behaving optimally a bit more, whereas Hex was not. And we would be able to distinguish such a drop in the performance. Also, within the X itself, we can also have performance differences between Hex and a later version of the Hex. So depending on each of the QRC release, we do try to make the engines more optimal and run faster, but there would be some corner cases where such a degradation may occur. So how are we going to resolve such a delayed executions? First, we need to automatically detect what queries are delayed or fluctuating. And once we identify such executions, we have to do internal A/B testing. So for every execution, we'll be testing and comparing between the two different plans. And based on that result, we'll generate or recommend which of the A/B testing results are better for the current statement. Also, for the first type with the parameterized queries, each parameter set may generate different plans. So we would like to add the feature of allowing to cache multiple plans. And based on this, the above three features are based on the new feature set called the SQL Plan Advisor, and caching the multiple plan is what we call plan variant. With the initial release, these are two separate feature sets, but eventually we're planning to combine them and move the plan variant into the SQL Plan Advisor as well. So to look a little bit deeper into the SQL Plan Advisor, so first of all, we would have to automatically detect if there are delays or increased execution times due to plan changes. Like I've mentioned, internally do A/B testing and compare the results and make a proposal and apply the solution. So as mentioned in the bottom part of the graph, we will automatically detect, choose the candidates that can that must be compared, evaluate the results, propose a solution, and apply the solution. With the current release, currently we are initially releasing with the hex versus non-hex comparison, but eventually we'll expand it to the other causes that I've mentioned in the previous slides to also include with the QRC04 release. So just to look a little bit deeper into the architecture of the SQL Plan Advisor, when a SQL statement is executed, it will store the statistics of different plans. So with the current version, it will compare hex versus non-hex statistics. And if we detect there's a degradance, then it will be selected as a candidate. The customer will choose if they want to tune the statement. Internally, we'll conduct the A/B test for every execution and then provide a proposal of which of the plans are better. And like I've mentioned with the QRC04, we will utilize the plan stability in the future release. So also we can do comparisons between hex versus a newer version of hex. And based on that, we would mark the current plan A to be not to be utilized and make sure that plan B or the optimal plan gets used during the query optimization and execution. So just to go into the detail, we would have a new application as part of the HANA Cloud Central, as part of the SQL Performance Management card. There's the new SQL Plan Advisor. It will show you the number of the automatically detected queries. And if you select in that area, it will list up all the queries that are detected. This is based on the auto detection, so you can turn on or turn off the auto detection. And here you would have to select which query to start tuning. Since this is our initial release, we are making sure that we only start tuning what the user have selected, but as we mature, we would also make this automated and even start the tuning internally. But as of now, you would need to select and start tune. Once it's started tuning, it will start evaluating for every SQL execution it comes in. It will compare and execute between the plans, and finally also show the status of the execution as a monitoring graph and propose a solution. And if the auto tuning is turned on, it will automatically select the best one and use that proposed plan automatically internally within the system. But if the configuration is off, the customer has the choice to finally accept the new plan or keep the existing plan as well. So we made sure that there are checkpoints where customers can validate before applying um, the, the new proposal, but also have the configuration to automate most of the processes internally within the system. The second feature I've mentioned is the plan variant. So with the multiple parameterized query sets, currently we are only using the first parameterized query values to compile the plan and cache the plan. And uh, if there is a data skewness in the initial parameter set, it may cause fluctuations because it doesn't represent most of the parameter values that is subsequent to it. So what we are providing is a plan variant where we can store and cache multiple plans for each of the parameter sets. And as you can see in the bottom, previously before the plan variant, the execution is very fluctuating, but after we've introduced the plan variant, that it is that performance is improved, and the deviance of the standard deviation have been improved. For the initial release, right now we're only supporting the hex execution, so we do not cover the existing legacy engine like join engine or OLAP engine, because hex is the future of our SQL execution engines. And we only support a few predicate types at this point. So the equal or greater, larger, between, like, and in. To be cautious and make sure that we are not introducing a regression with this new feature, we're initially releasing it with a hint, but eventually, like I've mentioned, we'll incorporate it into the SQL Plan Advisor, where we would automate this process later this year. And to show how we're utilizing the multiple plans, so basically using a predicate or filter value, we're using two parameterized filter sets. And based on that, two values, a plan is generated. Let's assume plan 1, and this is created. And then another one is executed, but it was created with a different plan based on the new parameter set of value A and B. And so it generates a different plan, and two plans are cached individually. A third execution comes in and is executed, but it was determined that it was the same plan as plan 1. Now we have two plans to form an eclipse. Based on these two plans, of eclipse is formed, and if there's another execution with the plan 2 again, also an eclipse will form based on the vector space. And once this eclipse have been formed, the fifth execution may be within the eclipse area or outside the boundary, but if it's inside, it will be determined as a catch hit, and it will automatically utilize the plan 1. So this is how we're utilizing the plan variant. And just to go back, so the first compilation is trying to make sure that which filters are those determining filters. So you have to make sure that the values that has the highest variant of data skewness is selected to calculate the selectivity distribution of each of the table set, and the highest score exceeding a threshold is selected as a variant filter. If it's determined that there are no variant filters, then the plan variant will not be utilized for that SQL statement. And during execution, it will follow the steps that I mentioned in the previous steps. And just to use the plan variant, like I've mentioned, we'll use it with the hint called plan variant. And also you can give a column name of a specific table that you are sure that this column is must be selected as a filter variant. So you can put in the column name, and if you want to check if the plan is utilizing the plan variant, just by creating an explain plan, the status will show as precompiled plan variant. And you can check the statistics in the MSQL plan variant statistics, and this is independent of the MSQL plan cache. So MSQL plan cache is still using the existing cache items or columns, and the size is still restricted. But for the plan variant, it is outside the plan cache size restriction. So currently we are storing it in a different space, but based on the usage in the future, we might combine it and regulate the space for those two. But currently, keep in mind that it is a separate space. Like I've mentioned, I have explained the two hints, but also you can create multiple, if you can mention that specific column should not be considered as a plan variant. So you can use the no plan variant column not to utilize that column. And also we have filter count. So you can adjust, I've mentioned two, but you can force it to increase the variant numbers. But keep in mind, if you're increasing this count, it increases the size of the plan that will be generated. And also, we do have a limitation in the number of the plan count. Also, this can be a little bit adjusted based on the hint. So that's it for the SQL Plan Advisor and the plan variant. Now I'll hand it over for the administration and tooling updates from Jose and Danielle.
All right. Thank you, Tesok, and hello, everyone. So my name is Jose Ramos, and with my colleague Dan Lewin, we handle the administration tooling for HANA Cloud. So let's take a look at our first set of new features in the administration tooling. So let's go to the next slide. Thank you. So from a general UI update that has happened in the tooling, this is the HANA Cloud Central tool. There's a few of them that I want to highlight over here before going to more specific features. We're going to go from left to right. So if you look at the left, what we've done is we've simplified the breadcrumb that shows the name of the current page where you are navigating. It's usually a child page, depending on where you are on the application. So now we're going to show that child page, which is going to make it easier for you to navigate to the parent page. And this comes in handy when you are navigating into an application that has multiple screens. You'll be able to then go back to the parent screen in case you want to do some administration of that particular task. In the past, you'd have to go to the very beginning and then go back into the application. That is no longer the case. And then we look at the top here, the command palette. There used to be just a search button for it, but now if there's enough space on your screen, we'll just show the search bar that we can start typing your commands in there, or your search commands in there as well. So it's a little bit easier for you to see. Looking on the right-hand side, the last refresh timestamp is now displayed in the main screen. Previously, you had to enable the automatic refresh capability. And then if you look at a tooltip in the automatic refresh, you'll actually see the last modified time in there. Now we're just showing it on the main screen. That's because a lot of folks wanted to see it right there. That way you don't need to go and look at the tooltip, and you don't need to enable automatic refresh to see it. And then if we look at the bottom here, this is something that we've added a new type of warning or error, and it happens whenever you have a HANA Cloud instance that is nearing the out of maintenance date, or is out of or just out of maintenance outright. Then you're going to get a warning or an error notification depending on the state there, and the text in there is going to clearly notify you that you need to upgrade your instance of HANA Cloud in advance. If you don't do that, then SAP will force upgrade the instance, but you have to keep in mind that if that happens, it's going to happen during a maintenance window, and that can disrupt the availability of your instance for up to an hour. So it's strongly recommended that you take the time and do this upgrade, and now you will be able to see that a little bit more clearly in the UI. All right, let's move on to the next slide. And now we're going to start looking at some individual functionality that we've added into HANA Cloud Central. First of all, we've enhanced the instance state and the notifications that you see. The status column was now renamed to state because we feel that that now shows a little bit better, or conveys a little bit better what we're trying to show here. And there's some additional text now that shows underneath the state whenever an operation is in progress. This is going to reflect the state of the instance no matter what the operation is happening. What that means is that when you see the state of the instance, which is going to be either running, starting, stopped, that is the state of your instance, and then there might be an operation in the background, and then you're going to see what that operation is underneath, if such an operation is actually occurring. As you can see here, what the values of the state are. So now there's more values of the state that you'll be able to see. And then whenever you used to see the running with issues warning, that now has been replaced with another notification, which is called operation failed. It's a warning that shows up, and if you actually click on that notification, you're going to see a description of why the operation failed, and that's going to show up in your notifications dialog. So overall, we've enhanced the state of your instances, what you see in HANA Cloud Central, the state of instances, and giving you more information about the operation that is happening for that instance. And if an operation actually failed, you'll have the mechanism to see why the operation failed and take the appropriate action. All right, let's move on to the next slide, please. The consumption monitor is a new application that is added into HANA Cloud Central. In the overview page of HANA Cloud Central, you're now going to see a consumption container card, which is going to show you the capacity units that are consumed this month, as well as a breakdown of how those are consumed. And if you click on that card, you're going to now go to a new application that's called the consumption monitor. On the consumption monitor, there's a couple of visualizations that we show you. The one you see here is it's called a stand key diagram, and basically it's a breakdown of where the capacity units are being spent in your memory, your replicas, so your main instance, your replicas, and then that is broken down into memory, compute, storage, as well as your backup storage, and so on. And then you can visualize that specific consumption for a day, or you can select a range of days, and then the graph is going to change accordingly. You can also change the visualization to be a bar chart in case you like to see it, a different representation of how that is. And then at the bottom, you're going to see a lot of details about the consumption of your instance. And that is for the current month. By default, we store the last 40 days, and then that's so you can go back up to 40 days to see your consumption of that. Now, this will show you the accumulated cost. It allows you to visualize quite nicely how you are consuming your HANA Cloud instance, and then you'll be able to actually see if there's a trend in case you're consuming more capacity than you expect, and then you can take the appropriate course of action in case you want to reduce that. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Dan to continue the presentation.
Thank you, Jose. So my name is Dan Van Loon, and I'm going to continue on showing some additional features and the administrative tooling. And the first feature that I'd like to demonstrate here, or to talk about, is the database objects. So a new application named Database Objects has been added to SAP HANA Cloud Central, which enables search and viewing of catalog objects. So there are multiple ways that you can access this new feature. So the first one is to go to the command palette, and you can search for database objects. you could go to the instance list, and from the actions menu, you could open up the database objects for the particular instance. Or on the sidebar, you can see there's the new application, database objects. Once the application opens, you'll have an option to filter, add some different filters. The first one is by type. So if you want to look at a HANA database versus a data lake relational engine, you can add that filter. And then you'll need to select the instance that you'd like to do a search on. And then optionally, you can specify a schema filter and also a name filter. So in this case, we can see that we have a filter on the hotel schema. I've got 6 different tables, 2 views, 2 functions, and a procedure. And if you select a particular object, such as the hotel table here, you can then see the column information. So you can see the different columns that are part of that table, the data types that make up the table. And on the top right, there's an option to generate SQL statements. So you can generate a create statement, an insert statement, a select statement for your particular table, and those will open directly within the SQL console. If you look at the runtime information, so this is for a different table called reservation, you can see information about the number of records within the table, how much space is being used on disk and in memory. And if the table contains partitions, you can see partition information and how the records are distributed among the partitions. Okay, next up is Cloud Foundry, additional Cloud Foundry support in the multi-environment tooling. And to sort of put that in context, within the SAP BTP, there are different runtimes such as Cloud Foundry, Kima Kubernetes. And when you create an instance, you can create it within different runtimes. And you can see here, I've got 2 different SAP HANA Cloud instances, one that's running within Cloud Foundry and one that's running in the other environments or at the sub-account level. If we take a look at that within SAP HANA Cloud Central, you can also see that the runtime information is shown here. And in the previous version of the tooling, when you were to create a new instance, it would create into the other environments or at the sub-account level. And because SAP HANA Cloud Central itself is running within the B2B sub-account, so it didn't have specific information about Cloud Foundry, and you were unable to delete an instance or create an instance into Cloud Foundry. But today, you're now able to sign into Cloud Foundry, so to do a secondary login. And as you can see here in the Create Instance wizard, you now have an option to choose. Do you want to deploy your instance into the sub-account or other environments, or do you want to deploy it into Cloud Foundry? And if you do choose to Cloud Foundry, then you now have a drop-down showing the different spaces that are available within a specific Cloud Foundry organization that you've logged into. Further, within the instance mapping screen, whether in the Create Instance or the Manage Configuration wizard, if you do choose to map your instance into a particular Cloud Foundry space, there are now drop-downs that provide the GUIDs for you with the associated names. So previously, this was a bit of a pain because you had to fill in the GUIDs manually. So this is a nice enhancement. And the same feature also applies within the Database Explorer. So there's now an option to do a secondary login to Cloud Foundry from the multi-environment version of the Database Explorer. Previously, if you wanted to add an HDI container, you would have had to specify the host information, the port, the user, the password. And now once you've signed into the Cloud Foundry environment or into a Cloud Foundry environment, there's a drop-down, or you have now a list that you can pick the different HDI containers that you would like to add. If you do want to see which Cloud Foundry environment you're currently logged into, you can go to the settings within either the SAP HANA Cloud Central or the Database Explorer. And you can see the Cloud Foundry organization that you've signed into, as well as you have an option to sign out and then optionally to sign into a different organization. Okay, moving on to the SQL console, a new feature is the ability to provide visual indication of potential errors within the SQL statements before they're executed. So in this case, you can see that there's 2 errors markers are shown. And again, this is happens just as you're typing. If you do press Alt-E or Shift-Alt-E, you'll either navigate to the next error or navigate to the previous error. And you can see in this particular case, the column ID doesn't exist in the table. And in the second case, the error marker is because the parentheses were missing from the function call count. The last feature here that I wanted to highlight are there are some enhancements into the import and export wizards for the data lake relational engine within the Database Explorer. So you can now choose to export your data to data lake files. And when you do that, you have an option of exporting to the associated data lake files instance. So whenever you create a data lake relational engine, there's going to be an associated data lake files instance. And a nice benefit of doing that is that you do not have to worry about credentials because you're already connected to the base data lake relational engine. We also added support in addition to CSV to Parquet. So that is another nice addition. And then if you do choose to use CSV, there are new options for both the export wizard and the import wizard. So there is now an option for an encryption key, for encoding, null format, and quote values on the export. And on an import, there is, again, an encryption key, a number of rows to import, as well as additional options such as remove quotes around values, check constraints, and strip trailing blanks. So that concludes some of the new features within the administrative tooling. And with that, I'd like to pass it over to my colleague, Christoph Morgen, to talk about some new enhancements in machine learning. Over to you, Christoph.
Thank you very much, Dan, and welcome from my side. I'll overview the enhancements in our machine learning libraries, the predictive analysis library, and the automated predictive library in this current HANA Cloud release, as well as the Python machine learning client. So the key enhancements in this quarter's release with respect to the predictive analysis library and key algorithms is a new machine learning model-based text classification algorithm. Text classification, text mining functions in HANA Cloud at this stage have been using a nearest neighbor function behind the scenes, and as machine learning models, like for example, random decision tree based text classifications algorithms outperform often k-nearest neighbor space classification. We have added this new function to just enrich the capabilities in HANA Cloud in this area. Key enhancements in the area of algorithms is a new implementation of our multi-layer perceptron, our neural network algorithm in HANA Cloud. It's called multitask MLP because it now supports multi-label and multi-target regression scenarios. So we want to use a single model to predict multiple target classifiers or predicted regression columns. We will come to that in a second in more detail. Another new function in the PAL library is pre-processing functions to improve regression scenarios where we can detect point outliers for linear as well as hybrid grading boosting tree-based tree-based regression scenarios. So once these outliers can be detected and excluded from the training data, that certainly yields to better outcomes of the regression prediction. The automated predictive library 24/7 also includes in the cumulated form of the previous releases, 24/5, 24/3 included, a couple of enhancements with respect to statistical forecast analysis, breakdowns, etc., which are also linked here and which can be found in the APL documentation. There's an overview blog post available on all the PAL and Python machine learning client enhancements, which I will show and direct you to in a second. There's also the link to the blog post here in the slides. So the multitask multi-layer perceptron functions, as I said, is a unique capability as it allows us to train a single machine learning model while predicting multiple target columns at once. And commonly, those target columns are related to each other and share a rich set of the contributing features. This could be multiple regression targets like prices, which we'll see in a demo. That's the current price, it's the price in 10 days, it's the price in 30 days. So multiple targets which somehow share the same features which build a model. Or a commonly used case also in many of S/4HANA scenarios is value proposals in business application screens, where there's an entry form, and as a user, you don't know what to put into a specific field, and then you get a proposal by an AI-driven proposal by the application. And this kind of spans to a broader scenario if there's not a single field where you need to, where you want to benefit from a proposed value, but multiple fields, so multiple categorical fields. So that would be an algorithm here using the MLP multitask function for multi-label classification, where you want to train a single model predicting target values for multiple of those entry fields in a form of a business application. This algorithm is also enhanced to the classic implementation with respect to early stopping, so it saves kind of computation time as it stops early, detecting it cannot further optimize the model, and also the overall training time of the MLP model is greatly improved with also improved accuracy. So that's a kind of key enhancement for all the users who have been using the MLP algorithm before. You would be benefiting from faster training times and improved accuracy of the overall model. If we look at the Python machine learning client, there's a couple of nice enhancements, including support or improved support for the real vector type when using the HANA data frame methods like upserting into a table containing a vector data type column. The AutoML and pipeline functions have been improved with a visual editor for the AutoML scenario configuration. Fine-tuning of the best pipeline is now supported, as well as an enhanced explainability method called SAP Global Surrogate, which is kind of much faster when applying it to the predictions of a pipeline model. And just to kind of conclude the enhancements in the Python machine learning client, certainly the new functions which we have been releasing in the last quarter, like the Hull-White simulation and band font analysis have been added, as well as the enhancements with the text classification function and massive text mining functions. They are also now supported. Also, what we have shared in our sample repository, the new functions in the Python machine learning client. This is the demo notebook, which you can use to explore all the new capabilities when you're connecting to a HANA Cloud instance. Just to illustrate the first example, the visual editor for an AutoML scenario. I'm using here Titanic dataset predicting kind of survivors. And what you can basically do is use this new function, visual configuration of an AutoML scenario. You can load a default kind of set of operators or your prepared private set of operators, which may be a colleague defining the best practice for using AutoML classification has prepared for you, and then you can inspect the list of prepared operators. Maybe you want to change something, go into the parameters, and then maybe drop something or change something, close it, and once you're done, you can then basically go back, inspect the results, maybe just as a control for you. What is the configuration you will be using when then actually training the AutoML automated classification scenario? And with that, I just want to close it as showing the enhancements. All the other enhancements are also part of this demo notebook, which you will find in the HANA sample repository, which is also linked in this blog, which I have mentioned in the beginning. New machine learning features in HANA Cloud in the current release. And with that, I'd like to hand over to Roman for sharing the updates on the migration topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Christoph. Hopefully you can see my screen. So I'm Roman. So I'm leading SAP HANA to SAP HANA Cloud migration topic. And my primary responsibility is migration tooling and services. So if you have SAP HANA 2 in one of those flavors, so for instance, SAP BTP HANA Service on Cloud Foundry, or SAP BTP HANA Service on Neo, or SAP HANA on-premise, you can actually migrate those using our tool, self-service migration tool for SAP HANA Cloud. It offers a holistic migration approach. So starting from pre-migration checks, migrating your metadata, data, also HDI containers. And also it offers the possibility to receive migration notification events. And the tool is evolving over time. And we recently added a new feature to this tool. So you might have been wondering how long your migration may take. So it might be really crucial. So for instance, you would like to plan your downtime, and you before that you might have only guessed how long it could take. So now you can see how long it may take. So the new feature offers insights into average migration duration for comparable scenarios, and it obviously improves transparency. So it displays approximate amount of time needed to migrate similar database. So I would say this is really a helpful feature for all those who are willing to migrate from SAP HANA 2.0 to SAP HANA Cloud. So this was really short and concise update from my end. The migration self-service develops, as you can see, and with that I would like to hand it over to Jan. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roman. So hello everybody. Before I start talking about new innovations with calculation views, let me just point out something that's already available for some time, but we have the feeling that often customers are not aware of this option. So just let me point that out quickly. It's meanwhile possible that you can connect with your Business Application Studio also to an HANA on-premise installation. The only prerequisite is that the HANA is running in an XS Advanced environment and that you have a cloud connector. With that, you have now hopefully an easier way of migrating or integrating and transition from HANA on-premise and HANA Cloud by having the same tooling for developing in HANA Cloud and in HANA on-premise. Having said that, let's look at the new innovations. The first innovation that I want to talk about is in the context of simplifying life, so to say. It's about window functions. So in the past, if you wanted to duplicate a window function definition, for example, you wanted to define a leg 1 and you want to have a window function with a leg 2 and so on, you had to create each of the window functions anew. Now you have the option to use a duplicate functionality, which means you can just duplicate your window function and then modify the differences afterwards. So this should increase your productivity when working with window functions. Also in this area of window functions, we added information about the where used. So you can now find out where the result column of your window function is used inside your calculation view to see the impact that the window function has on the model. Also, to make life easier, we offer now an option to copy calculated columns. You can select multiple calculated columns at the same time and copy them, and then obviously also paste them in another node in the same calculation view. Before, you only had the option of duplicating, which was within the same node. Now you have the option to copy it and move it to a different node within the same calculation view. What you cannot copy is the counter, because the counter is attached to the specific default node, so you cannot simply move them freely around. So if you select also a counter, then this is simply ignored. And please also keep in mind that if you copy a calculated column,
into another node, there might be some inconsistencies. For example, if your expression of the calculated column relies on a certain column that's not available in the target node, then the expression is invalid and cannot be deployed, obviously. If you want to find out whether or detect such inconsistencies, then you can run a validate syntax after you've copied the individual calculated columns. For rank nodes, we have also a new feature with ranking nodes. You typically, or you sort records based on a certain criterion or a certain column, and you partition them by another column, typically, at least. So for example, you want to have the topmost sales for each country. Now there is a setting, the target value, which allows you to specify how many records you want per partition. So for example, you want to have 3 topmost sales per country. The problem is now, or in the past was, that if you wanted not to restrict it, but you wanted to have all records for each country, then you had to specify a value that was large enough so that it covered every record that was potentially in your model, or also later at later stages after you added some data to the tables. Now you have the option to use the all values setting, which means that all records will be returned and you don't have to specify a limit anymore here. Be aware that similar to SQL, result sets don't have an inherent order. That means after the rank node, the records will be sorted. But if you process them further, then the sequence can be lost again. So if you want to rely on a specific sequence, then please make sure that your query orders based on, for example, the generated rank column. For giving you more insights into what's happening in your model and better understanding of your model, we have the outline, which you can start here by clicking on this button, and then you see a condensed version of your calculation view. And we have enhanced that now so that you can easily see here already what type of joins are used by looking at the icons. And if you click here on the individual nodes, then automatically the respective node is brought into focus, so that if you want to see even more details, then you can deep dive into them here. We already offered the generate documents option, which gives you a summary of your calculation view for kind of documentation or to better understand what's going on in it. And we have enhanced that now significantly and also updated fields that were offered or shown earlier and removed others that have much less impact now working in HANA Cloud. So that we adapted it to the new environment even better. And we enhanced the information about joins and expressions. So you find here now information about your joins as well. So you see here the cardinality and other settings for your join. And also you find here your individual expressions for example, filters or calculated columns, so that you see what expressions are used in your calculation view and you get a good overview of it. We offer now also the validate syntax option for non-equi joins. So you can validate your expression for the non-equi join nodes. And we also include now the validation of user-defined functions. So you can also use user-defined functions in the expression that you want to validate. Structured filters have been introduced as another option to secure calculation views. And structured filters are very similar to analytic privileges. So what are analytic privileges? Analytic privileges are means to restrict what records are visible. And this restriction is basically a filter on records and determines what should be visible. Now, the main difference between structured filter and analytic privileges is that analytic privileges have to be assigned explicitly to a user, while structured filters are automatically assigned to all users. Which means if you create a structured filter, every user will automatically have this privilege. That also means that if you want to differentiate between users in terms of what they are allowed to see, then you have to specify in the filter condition of the structured filter a condition that is based on a username. For analytic privileges, you can do that as well, but you could also differentiate between users by assigning only to certain users a specific analytic privilege. Now, if you decide to use structured filter for securing your calculation view, you can do so now. You find the option in the semantics node under view properties, and here you have the apply privileges option structured filter. We offer various shortcuts to make your work with calculation views more productive. So you can, for example, start a data preview or deployment via shortcuts. We are added now a shortcut also for a refresh of metadata, which is important if your underlying data sources have changed and you want to see the changes. So typically the metadata of underlying data sources is read in when you open the calculation view. So changes later will not be shown automatically. With a refresh button, you can force this updated underlying sources to be shown. And we offer now also a keyboard shortcut for that. And if you're not satisfied with the default setting here, similar to the other shortcuts, you can adapt it by going to the settings and searching for the shortcuts. Now, the last functionality that I would like to highlight shortly is the option for Add Data Source dialog. In the Add Data Source dialog, you have different ways of filtering for data source types. For example, sometimes you only want to see calculation views, sometimes you want to see tables. And now this choice is persisted, and it's persisted context sensitive. So it means if you open a Add Data Source dialog in the same context again later, your last choice will be remembered and you see the selected data source types. And if you open in another context, it will be another selected types. And with that, thanks for attending and listening. And I hand over to Susan for last words.
That is perfect, Jan. Just in time. Thank you very, very much to all our product experts presenting their most recent innovations for the Q2 delivery. Only the last few words from my side. We offer a bunch of contents accompanying each and every release. So you probably all know about the What's New viewer, which is our documentation that will always be updated with the recent release. And also we do have our blog post and specific blog posts for calculation views and machine learning. So definitely make sure to check out these extra resources for more details into our Q2 release. With this, we're already on top of the hour. So thanks very much for joining and see you next quarter.